My Fitbit recorded 8,000 steps last night while I was asleep in bed. I was staring at my wrist when Detective Lauren Briggs asked me to repeat what I'd just said. The Fitbit display glowed in the fluorescent light of the police station, showing 8,247 steps logged between 1:15 a.m. and 4:33 a.m. I'd been asleep the entire time, or at least I thought I had been. My fitness tracker, I said slowly, feeling the words catch in my throat. Says I walked over 4 miles last night, but I woke up in my bed. I never got up, not once. The detective leaned forward, her pen hovering over a yellow legal pad. Behind her, through the window of the interview room, I could see other officers moving through the hallway, normal people dealing with normal crimes. I wasn't sure what category this fell into yet. She asked me when I first noticed it, and I told her the truth. This morning, when I checked my sleep data like I did every morning with my coffee, expecting to see my usual 200 to 300 steps from bathroom trips. Instead, I saw numbers that made my stomach drop. 8,000 steps, a half marathon's worth of movement, while I was supposedly unconscious. 3 weeks earlier, everything had been normal. I'm a software engineer at a mid-sized tech firm in Austin, 34 years old, living in a decent apartment complex off Riverside Drive with my girlfriend of 2 years, Melissa. We'd been talking about getting a place together, maybe buying something before the market got even crazier. I'd bought the Fitbit 6 months prior as part of a New Year's resolution to track my fitness, the usual story. I'd been fairly consistent with it, wearing it every day, charging it every Sunday night. Melissa worked as a marketing coordinator for a startup downtown. Our lives were ordinary in the best way possible. We'd meal prep on Sundays, binge Netflix shows at night, occasionally go out with friends on weekends. I worked from home 3 days a week, which Melissa said she envied since her company required full-time office presence. She'd leave around 7:30 each morning, kissing me goodbye before I'd even fully woken up. I'd stumble to my home office around 8:30, make coffee, check my stats, steps from the previous day, sleep quality, heart rate zones. The data gave me a strange satisfaction, watching the graphs trend upward as I got healthier. The first weird night happened on a Monday. I woke up feeling like I'd been hit by a truck, muscles sore, head foggy, that deep exhaustion that comes from not really sleeping at all. I figured I was coming down with something. The office had been passing around a cold, and I'd been working late on a product launch. When I checked my Fitbit over breakfast, I saw 1,847 steps logged between midnight and 6 a.m. That seemed high for a night's sleep, but not impossible. Maybe I'd been restless, gotten up for water a few times and forgotten. Maybe I'd walked to the bathroom more than I remembered. I told myself it was nothing. Stress, poor sleep quality, maybe sleepwalking. I'd had a roommate in college who'd once made a sandwich at 3 in the morning with no memory of it. Weird things happen when you're exhausted. I took some ibuprofen, drank an extra cup of coffee, and pushed through the day. Melissa noticed I seemed tired when she got home that evening. I mentioned the strange step count, and she laughed, suggesting maybe the device was malfunctioning. "Aren't those things supposed to be on your wrist?" she said, tapping my Fitbit. Maybe it was registering arm movements or something. That explanation satisfied me until it happened again. 4 days later, Friday night, I went to bed at 11 after we watched a movie. I took half a Benadryl because my allergies had been acting up, which usually knocked me out cold. I woke up Saturday morning at 7, feeling that same demolished exhaustion, like I'd run a marathon in my sleep. My calves were tight. My feet felt tender. When I checked the app, my throat went dry. 3,156 steps between 1 a.m. and 5 a.m. 4 hours of movement, according to the Fitbit's detailed timeline. The graph showed continuous activity, not the random spikes you'd see from tossing and turning, but sustained, steady movement. Walking movement. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the data, trying to make sense of it. Melissa was still asleep beside me, her breathing soft and even. Our bedroom door was closed. The apartment was quiet. I pulled up the heart rate data and saw my pulse had been elevated during those hours, not exercising hard, but definitely higher than sleep levels. Between 95 and 110 beats per minute, consistent with walking. I felt a cold prickle run down my spine. Something was wrong. This wasn't a glitch. This wasn't restless sleep. Something was happening to me at night that I had no memory of. I spent that Saturday researching sleepwalking, parasomnia, and nocturnal movement disorders. The internet offered plenty of possibilities, but few answers. Most sleepwalkers perform simple, repetitive actions. Walking to the bathroom, opening doors, maybe going to the kitchen. They don't typically walk thousands of steps in a sustained pattern, and most people who sleepwalk have some awareness of it, either from family members noticing or from waking up in strange places. I had neither. I always woke up in bed, in the same position, with no memory of movement. Melissa had never mentioned seeing me get up, and she was a light sleeper. She'd wake up if I so much as went to get water. I didn't mention the second incident to her that day. I don't know why. Maybe I didn't want to worry her, or maybe I was afraid she'd think I was losing it. Instead, I suggested we set up the cheap security camera we'd bought months ago for the living room. "Just to keep an eye on things while we're out," I told her. She shrugged and said sure. I positioned it in the bedroom that night, angled toward the bed, telling Melissa I wanted to see if I was snoring or moving around too much. She thought I was being paranoid about my sleep quality, but she didn't object. I went to bed that Saturday night with the camera recording. Sunday morning, I woke up feeling normal. Refreshed even. 8 hours of solid sleep according to the Fitbit, with only 142 steps logged, probably bathroom trips I didn't fully remember. I felt a wash of relief. Maybe the previous incidents had been flukes. Maybe I had been getting sick and was now recovering. I checked the security camera footage anyway, fast-forwarding through the night. Nothing unusual. I could see both of us sleeping. I got up once around 3 a.m., walked out of frame, presumably to the bathroom, and returned 2 minutes later. The step count matched. Everything was fine. I convinced myself I'd been overthinking it. By Monday, I'd almost forgotten about it. Work was busy with the product launch approaching, and I was pulling longer hours. Melissa had a big campaign deadline, so we were both stressed and tired. We ordered takeout most nights, collapsed on the couch, barely spoke beyond the logistics of our days. Normal life, normal stress, nothing weird. Then came the following Friday night. That's when everything fell apart in a way I couldn't rationalize away. I'd set the camera up again earlier that week, just to be safe, I told myself, and had been checking the footage each morning. Nothing unusual. But Friday night broke the pattern. I woke up Saturday morning with that same crushing exhaustion. Every muscle ached. My feet were dirty. That detail hit me like ice water. The soles of my feet had visible dirt on them, like I'd been walking outside. I stared at them, my mind refusing to process what I was seeing. Our apartment is carpeted. Even the bathroom is tile. There's no way to get dirt on your feet from walking inside. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and pulled up the Fitbit app. 6,891 steps, logged between midnight and 4:47 a.m., nearly 5 hours of continuous walking. My heart rate had been elevated the entire time, the graph showing sustained activity in the fat burn zone. I stumbled out of bed, trying not to wake Melissa, and went to the living room to check the security camera. I pulled up the footage on my laptop, my hands trembling so badly I could barely work the trackpad. I started at 11 p.m. when we'd gone to bed. Normal. Both of us lying down, settling in. Then at 12:14 a.m., I watched myself sit up. The movement was smooth, deliberate, not the confused, disoriented behavior of a sleepwalker. I watched myself get out of bed, walk out of frame toward the bedroom door, and disappear. The timestamp ticked forward, 12:15, 12:30, 1 a.m. I didn't come back. Melissa never stirred. I fast-forwarded, my stomach churning. At 4:51 a.m., I reappeared in frame, walking back into the bedroom with the same calm, purposeful movement. I got back into bed, pulled the covers over myself, and settled into sleeping position. All of this without any sign of consciousness. No fumbling, no hesitation, just smooth, practiced motion. I watched it 3 more times, trying to find some detail that would make it make sense. On the 4th viewing, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. When I left the bedroom, I was wearing shoes. I could see them on my feet in the dim light from the hallway. When I returned, I was still wearing them. I got back into bed wearing shoes. I sat there on the couch, staring at the frozen frame of myself climbing back under the covers, and tried to remember anything from that night. Nothing. Complete blackness. I remembered Melissa kissing me goodnight around 11. I remembered closing my eyes. Then I remembered waking up exhausted with dirty feet. Everything in between was gone, erased. I had walked nearly 7,000 steps in the middle of the night, left my apartment, gone somewhere, and returned with absolutely no memory of any of it. And this wasn't the first time. I spent that Saturday in a daze. Melissa noticed I was off and asked if I was feeling okay. I told her I thought I might be sleepwalking, showing her the Fitbit data, but not the camera footage. I wasn't ready to admit how disturbing it was yet, even to myself. She seemed concerned, but not alarmed, suggesting I see a doctor. "Maybe it's stress," she said, rubbing my shoulder. "You've been working so hard lately. Your body might be acting out." That made sense. That was a rational explanation. I clung to it. I made an appointment with my primary care physician for Monday, but in the meantime, I decided to gather more data. I moved the security camera to the living room, positioning it to catch the front door. If I was leaving the apartment, I needed to know where I was going. I also enabled location tracking on my phone, something I'd always had turned off for privacy reasons. If I was wandering around Austin in the middle of the night, my phone's GPS would record it. I told Melissa I was testing some new security settings. She barely paid attention, distracted by her own work stress. That night, Sunday, I went to bed with a sense of dread pooling in my stomach. I didn't want to sleep. I was afraid of what might happen while I was unconscious. Monday morning arrived like a sentencing. I woke up destroyed, worse than any of the previous times. My legs felt like rubber, my head pounded, and my Fitbit showed 8,247 steps, logged between 1:15 a.m. and 4:33 a.m., 3 hours and 18 minutes of sustained walking. I checked my phone's location history with trembling hands, pulling up the timeline while still in bed. The data loaded slowly, each second stretching out painfully. Then I saw it, a route map showing my movements from the previous night. I had left our apartment at 1:17 a.m. and walked to a location 3 blocks away, an address I didn't recognize on East 7th Street. I'd stayed there for 47 minutes. Then I'd walked to another location near the river, stayed for 32 minutes, and walked to a third address off South Congress. At each stop, The GPS showed me stationary, not moving around. Just there, standing or sitting somewhere for extended periods. Then, at 4:29 a.m., I'd returned home. The route was clearly marked on the map, a neat trail of breadcrumbs documenting my unconscious journey through downtown Austin in the middle of the night. I felt like I was going to be sick. This wasn't sleepwalking. Sleepwalkers don't navigate complex routes through city streets. They don't make multiple stops at specific addresses. I pulled up the security camera footage. At 1:16 a.m., I watched myself walk to the front door, unlock it with steady hands, and leave the apartment. I was fully dressed. Jeans, a hoodie, shoes. At 4:32 a.m., I returned, locked the door behind me, and walked back to the bedroom. No stumbling, no confusion. I moved like someone who was awake and aware of what they were doing. But I had no memory of any of it. None. I sat there on the edge of the bed, staring at the phone in my hands, trying to understand what was happening to me. Melissa had already left for work. The apartment was silent except for my own breathing, which was coming too fast, too shallow. I called in sick to work, actually sick with fear and confusion, and spent the morning Googling the addresses from my GPS history. The first location was a 24-hour convenience store. The second was a parking lot near the river with no businesses nearby. The third was a residential building, an older complex with about 20 units. None of them meant anything to me. I'd never been to any of these places, at least not that I could remember. Why would I go there in the middle of the night? What was I doing for 47 minutes at a convenience store? Why would I stand in an empty parking lot for half an hour? My doctor's appointment that afternoon provided no answers. Dr. Nathan Reeves, my physician for the past 5 years, listened to my explanation with increasing concern. I showed him the Fitbit data, the GPS routes, and one of the security camera videos. He watched it all in silence, his expression growing more serious with each piece of evidence. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and said something I wasn't expecting. "I don't think you're sleepwalking." He explained that true sleepwalking, somnambulism, typically involves simple, automatic behaviors. Walking around the house, maybe going to the kitchen, performing routine tasks. What I was describing was far more complex. Navigating city streets, traveling to multiple locations, apparently interacting with the environment enough to avoid injury or detection. That required a level of consciousness that didn't align with any sleep disorder he was familiar with. He suggested 3 possibilities: complex, partial seizures that were somehow allowing me to perform elaborate activities during episodes, some kind of dissociative fugue state triggered by extreme stress, or, and he hesitated before saying this, someone might be drugging me. The word drugging hit me like a physical blow. I actually laughed, a short, barking sound. "That's not possible," I said. "I live with my girlfriend. We're the only ones with keys. No one else has access to my food or drinks." Dr. Reeves didn't look convinced. He ordered a full neurological workup, EEG, MRI, blood tests to check for seizure disorders or brain abnormalities. He also suggested, carefully, that I might want to get a comprehensive toxicology screen done privately. "Just to rule it out," he said. "Some substances can cause blackouts and complex behaviors. Benzodiazepines, certain sleep medications, even some combinations of over-the-counter drugs. If someone were giving you something, it might explain the memory loss and the extended periods of unconscious activity." I left the appointment feeling worse than when I'd arrived. The idea that someone might be drugging me seemed insane, but so did everything else that was happening. I decided to follow his advice and went to a private lab that afternoon to have blood drawn for a comprehensive drug panel. The neurological tests would take a few days to schedule, but the toxicology results would be available in 48 hours. I drove home in a fog, barely paying attention to traffic, my mind spinning through possibilities. If someone was drugging me, who? How? Why? And what was I doing during these blackout periods? Was I just wandering around, or was someone controlling me, directing me to specific locations for specific purposes? That night, I told Melissa everything. I showed her all the evidence, the Fitbit data, the GPS routes, the security footage. I watched her face go through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, concern, fear. When I mentioned the possibility of being drugged, she looked horrified. "That's insane," she said, echoing my own reaction from earlier. "Who would do that? Why?" I didn't have answers. She suggested maybe I should stay somewhere else for a few nights, maybe with a friend, just to see if the episodes continued in a different environment. It was a good idea, but something stopped me from agreeing immediately. A small, paranoid voice in the back of my mind asking, why did she suggest I leave? I hated myself for thinking it. This was Melissa. We'd been together for 2 years. She had no reason to hurt me. But the voice persisted, whispering doubts I didn't want to acknowledge. Instead of leaving, I suggested we lock the bedroom door from the inside and hide the key. If I tried to leave during the night, I wouldn't be able to. Melissa agreed, though she looked uncomfortable with the idea. We wedged a chair under the doorknob too, for extra security. I went to bed that night feeling like a prisoner in my own home, but at least I'd be safe. At least I wouldn't end up wandering the streets again. I woke up Wednesday morning in bed, feeling relatively normal. The Fitbit showed 287 steps overnight, reasonable for bathroom trips. The bedroom door was still locked, the chair still in place. Relief flooded through me so intensely I almost cried. Whatever was happening, the physical barrier had worked. I couldn't leave if I couldn't open the door. It was that simple. Melissa seemed relieved too, giving me a long hug before leaving for work. "See?" she said. "Maybe you just needed to feel secure. Sometimes anxiety can cause all kinds of physical symptoms." I wanted to believe her. But when I checked the security camera footage from the living room, which I'd left running, my relief evaporated. At 2:03 a.m., the front door had opened. Someone had entered the apartment, moved around the living room for several minutes, then left at 2:47 a.m. The footage was grainy in the low light, but I could make out a figure moving through the space with familiar ease, like they knew the layout. They went to the kitchen. They spent time near the couch. Then they left, locking the door behind them. I watched the clip 5 times, my heart hammering. Someone had been in our apartment while we slept. Someone with a key. Someone who knew where the security camera was positioned because they stayed just out of clear view the entire time, their face never fully visible. I called the apartment complex's management office immediately. The woman who answered, Susan, according to her professional greeting, listened to my frantic explanation that someone had entered my unit without permission. She sounded skeptical, but agreed to check the master key log. According to their records, no maintenance staff or office personnel had accessed my apartment in the past week. The only key access was from the 2 keys issued to me and my girlfriend when we signed the lease 18 months ago. "Could someone have made a copy?" I asked, my voice cracking. "That's against lease policy," Susan said primly. "All keys are tracked, and unauthorized duplication is grounds for immediate eviction." That didn't answer my question. I told her I wanted the locks changed immediately and that I'd file a police report about the break-in. She said they could schedule a lock change for Friday, 2 days away. I hung up feeling frustrated and frightened. 2 days. Anything could happen in 2 days. I called a locksmith directly and paid extra for same-day service. By 5 p.m., our apartment had new locks and new keys. I didn't give the spare to the office. I kept both copies. When Melissa came home, I showed her the footage and the new keys. She looked shaken. "Maybe it was maintenance," she suggested weakly. "Maybe they didn't log it properly." I pointed out that the timestamp showed 2 a.m., not exactly normal maintenance hours, and whoever it was had deliberately stayed out of clear camera view. That wasn't the behavior of someone doing legitimate work. Melissa didn't have a good response to that. She suggested again that maybe I should stay elsewhere, but I was tired of running from this. I needed to know what was happening and why. Thursday morning brought the toxicology results. I picked them up from the lab in person, sitting in my car in the parking lot as I read through the report. The technical language was dense, but the summary at the end was clear enough. Positive for zolpidem, Ambien, at levels consistent with a 20 to 30 milligrams dose. Zolpidem, a powerful sedative hypnotic medication used for insomnia. At high doses, it was known to cause complex sleep-related behaviors, including walking, driving, eating, and other activities while not fully awake. The medical literature called it Ambien sleepwalking. People had done elaborate things while under its influence with no memory afterward. But I didn't take Ambien. I'd never been prescribed it. I didn't have any in the apartment. Someone was giving it to me. I sat in that parking lot for 20 minutes, the report clutched in my shaking hands trying to process the implications. Someone was drugging me with Ambien. Someone with access to my apartment, my food, my drinks. Someone who had a key, or had made a copy before I changed the locks. Someone who wanted me unconscious and compliant enough to be controlled, directed to specific locations for reasons I couldn't fathom. The list of people with that kind of access was very, very short. I drove home and went straight to the kitchen, methodically checking every container of food and drink. Nothing looked tampered with, but that didn't mean much. Ambien could be ground into powder and mixed into almost anything. Coffee creamer, orange juice, pasta sauce. I dumped everything that had been opened, every beverage, condiment, and leftover. Melissa came home while I was doing it and asked what was happening. I showed her the toxicology report. She read it twice, her face going pale. "Someone's been drugging you," she whispered. "But who? How?" I said I didn't know, but we needed to call the police. This was beyond weird sleep problems or stress. This was a crime. Someone was systematically poisoning me, controlling my movements, using me for something while I was unconscious. Melissa nodded slowly and pulled out her phone. Detective Lauren Briggs arrived at our apartment an hour later with her partner, Officer Michael Torres. She was mid-40s, with tired eyes and graying hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. Torres was younger, maybe 30, with the kind of attentive posture that suggested he actually cared about details. I laid everything out for them. The Fitbit data, the GPS routes, the security footage, the toxicology report, the break-in video. They took notes, asked questions, exchanged looks I couldn't interpret. Detective Briggs focused on the timeline, asking me to walk through each incident chronologically. Officer Torres examined the security camera footage closely, replaying the break-in sequence multiple times. When I finished explaining, Detective Briggs sat back and said something that made my skin crawl. "Has anyone in your life been acting differently lately? New people in your social circle? Changes in behavior from people close to you? Unusual requests or questions?" I thought about it. Nothing obvious. My life had been routine: work, home, Melissa, occasional friends. No new people, no strange interactions. Except, I trailed off, remembering something. About 2 months ago, Melissa had suggested I start taking melatonin for better sleep. She'd bought a bottle and left it on the bathroom counter. I'd taken it a few times but stopped because it made me groggy in the morning. When did the first incident occur? Detective Briggs asked. I pulled up my Fitbit app and checked the data history. The first night with unusual step counts had been exactly 3 weeks ago. The melatonin bottle had appeared in our bathroom about 5 weeks ago. My mouth went dry. I need to check something, I said, getting up and walking to the bathroom with both officers following. I found the bottle in the medicine cabinet, just a standard over-the-counter supplement from a drugstore chain. I handed it to Detective Briggs. She examined it carefully, then turned to Torres. Bag this, she said. We'll have it tested. She turned back to me, her expression serious. I need to ask you some direct questions, and I need you to be honest with me. Has your girlfriend had access to your food and drinks? Does she prepare meals for you? Do you share beverages? I felt sick answering, but I nodded yes to all of it. Melissa cooked dinner most nights. She made coffee in the morning sometimes. We shared containers of juice, milk, everything. It would be trivially easy for her to add something to my food or drinks without me noticing. Detective Briggs looked at Melissa, who was standing in the living room doorway looking pale and frightened. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to come down to the station to answer some questions. The next few hours were a blur. Melissa went with the officers, protesting that she hadn't done anything, that she would never hurt me, that this was all some terrible misunderstanding. I stayed at the apartment, feeling like the walls were closing in. Detective Briggs had asked me not to leave, saying they might need to search the premises. Around 10 p.m., she called me. The melatonin bottle had tested positive for crushed Ambien tablets, roughly 20 milligrams per melatonin pill, enough to cause significant sedation and complex sleep behaviors. They'd also searched Melissa's car and found a second bottle of Ambien in her glove compartment, prescribed to her under her own name from 3 months ago. She'd claimed it was for occasional insomnia, but the prescription had been filled twice, once in early December and again in early January. Each bottle contained 30 pills. According to the pharmacy records, she should have had at least 40 pills left. They'd found only 6. We're holding her for questioning, Detective Briggs said. Based on the evidence, we have probable cause to believe she's been administering a controlled substance to you without your knowledge or consent. That's felony assault in Texas, but we need to understand the why. Why would she do this? What was she trying to accomplish by controlling your movements at night? That was the question that haunted me through the sleepless night that followed. Alone in the apartment, our apartment, though it didn't feel like ours anymore, I tried to piece together what possible motive Melissa could have. Money? We kept separate bank accounts and split expenses evenly. She earned slightly more than I did. There was no financial incentive I could see. Another relationship? Maybe she was meeting someone while I was unconscious, but that didn't explain drugging me. She could just wait until I was naturally asleep. Control? Some kind of psychological dominance game? That seemed too elaborate and strange. The GPS data showed I'd been to specific locations. Maybe she was using me for something, making me go places, do things that she needed done but couldn't do herself. But what? I pulled up the list of addresses again, cross-referencing them with Google Maps. The convenience store, the parking lot, the residential building. I decided to visit them in person the next day. Maybe seeing the locations would trigger some memory or reveal some clue about what I'd been doing there. Friday morning, Detective Briggs called again. Melissa had confessed. Partially. She admitted to putting Ambien in the melatonin bottle, but claimed she'd done it to help me sleep better because I'd been so stressed and tired. She said she didn't know it would cause me to walk around at night, and she certainly hadn't been directing my movements or controlling where I went. Detective Briggs didn't believe her. Her story doesn't add up, she told me. She had to have known that Ambien could cause complex behaviors. It's one of the most well-known side effects, clearly stated on all the warning labels. And the dosage she was giving you was high enough to almost guarantee you'd be in a heavily suggestible state. Plus, there's the break-in footage. We've been analyzing it more carefully, and we're confident the person entering your apartment that night was her. The height, build, and movement patterns all match. She came in while you were locked in the bedroom, did something in the apartment, then left. We need to figure out what she was doing and why. That afternoon, I drove to the first address on my GPS history, the 24-hour convenience store on East 7th. It was a standard setup: snacks, drinks, lottery tickets, a bored clerk behind plexiglass. I asked if they had security footage from the previous Sunday night. The clerk looked at me like I was insane. I explained I thought I might have been there and needed to verify it for a police investigation. He called the manager. The manager, a harried man named George, said they kept footage for 30 days and agreed to check their system for the time period I specified. 20 minutes later, I was watching myself on a grainy monitor in the back office. There I was, walking into the store at 1:19 a.m. I moved slowly, deliberately, like someone underwater. I went directly to the ATM in the corner, something I hadn't noticed when I walked in, and stood in front of it for several minutes. The camera angle wasn't quite right to show the screen, but I could see my hands moving, pressing buttons. Then I walked out. The timestamp showed I'd been there for 43 minutes, most of it standing at that ATM. Did I take money out? I asked George. He pulled up the transaction logs. My debit card had been used to withdraw $400 at 1:31 a.m. Maximum daily limit from that ATM. I felt cold all over. I checked my bank account on my phone. I hadn't looked at it in a few days, focused as I'd been on the medical crisis. The withdrawal was there. $400 removed from my checking account at 1:31 a.m. on Sunday. But the money wasn't in my wallet. I'd checked that morning after finding the Ambien results, panicking that I might have lost my cards during my blackout wandering. Everything had been in place. License, debit card, credit cards, $63 in cash. If I'd withdrawn $400, where had it gone? George printed out a still image from the footage showing me at the ATM. I thanked him and left, my mind racing. The second location was next, the parking lot by the river. It was exactly what it looked like on Google Maps, an empty lot near a closed business, poorly lit, isolated. According to my GPS data, I'd stood here for 32 minutes in the middle of the night. Why? I walked around the perimeter, looking for anything that might explain it. Nothing obvious. No cameras that I could see, just cracked asphalt and the sound of the river nearby. I was about to leave when I noticed something. A vehicle parked at the far end of the lot. A dark sedan, windows tinted, no one inside that I could see. It hadn't been there when I pulled in. I took a photo of the license plate and left quickly, feeling exposed. The third location, the residential building off South Congress, was more promising. It was an older complex, maybe 30 years old, with external stairs and numbered doors. I didn't know which unit I'd been at, but the GPS marker was precise enough to narrow it down to a cluster of about 4 units. I stood in the parking lot, staring up at the building, trying to will my drugged brain to remember something. Nothing came. I was about to leave when a door opened on the second floor and a woman stepped out. She was maybe 50, wearing scrubs like she'd just gotten off a hospital shift. She saw me and paused. "Can I help you?" she called down. I made a split-second decision, to be honest. This is going to sound strange, but I think I was here a few nights ago and I don't remember it. I'm trying to figure out what happened. Her expression shifted from suspicious to concerned. "You look familiar," she said slowly, coming down the stairs. "Were you here Monday night? Around 2 in the morning?" My heart stopped. "Yes, I think so. Do you know what I was doing?" She studied me for a moment, then said something that changed everything. "You knocked on my door. Unit 214. You handed me an envelope with cash in it, $400, and said it was from Melissa, that she couldn't come herself, but wanted to make sure I got the payment this week. Then you left. You seemed off, like you were sick or drunk or something. I almost didn't take it, but I needed the money and Melissa had said she might send someone." The world tilted. "I'm sorry," I said carefully, "but who are you? How do you know Melissa?" The woman looked uncomfortable. "I'm Janet Holloway, Melissa's mother. We don't have a good relationship. She's been helping me out financially for about a year, sending me cash each month for my medical bills. She said she didn't want anyone knowing about it, especially you. She said you wouldn't understand family obligations or some such. So I was confused when you showed up instead of her, but I figured she must have told you after all." I stood there in that parking lot, trying to process what Janet Holloway had just told me. Melissa's mother. Melissa had told me her mother had died when she was 16, a car accident, a tragedy that had shaped her childhood. I'd never thought to question it. Why would I? People don't lie about dead parents. But here was a very alive woman claiming to be receiving monthly cash payments from my girlfriend. $400 each time, apparently. "I'm sorry," I said slowly, "but Melissa told me her mother was dead. She's said that since I met her. She's told that story to our friends, to my family. If you're really her mother, why would she tell everyone you were dead?" Janet's expression hardened. "Because I'm an addict," she said bluntly. "Prescription pills mainly, painkillers. I've been in and out of recovery for years. Melissa was ashamed of me. When she went to college, she cut contact. Told everyone I was dead because it was easier than explaining why she didn't want a relationship with her addict mother. About a year ago, I got diagnosed with cancer. Lung cancer, stage 3. I reached out to her through Facebook, told her I was trying to stay clean and needed help with medical bills that my crappy insurance wouldn't cover. She started sending money but made me promise never to contact her directly, never to show up at her work or apartment, and never to tell anyone who I was. She pulled out her phone and showed me messages between her and Melissa, months of texts coordinating cash payments, medical updates, instructions to stay away. The texts were cold, transactional, but they were definitely from Melissa's number. I recognized her typing style. "She sends the money through you?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Janet nodded. "Usually she drops it off herself, late at night when no one will see. But this week she sent you instead. You knocked on my door at 2 in the morning, handed me the envelope, said your little speech, and left. I figured she'd finally told you the truth. Guess not." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. This was why Melissa had been drugging me. Not for some elaborate crime or affair, but to keep her shameful secret. She'd been using me as an unconscious courier, making me withdraw cash and deliver it to her supposedly dead mother while I was too heavily sedated to remember. She'd controlled me like a puppet, sending me out into the night to do her errands while she maintained her carefully constructed lie, and she'd done it multiple times. All those nights with high step counts, how many of them had been drug-induced trips to Janet's apartment? I thanked Janet for her time and left, calling Detective Briggs as I drove. I told her everything. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "Come down to the station. We need your statement on record, and I think we have enough now to charge her." At the station, I gave a formal statement, walking through the entire timeline with more pieces fitting into place. The melatonin bottles appearing around the time Janet had been diagnosed, the high step counts corresponding to dates when rent would be due. The break-in footage was likely Melissa checking on me after I'd locked the bedroom door, maybe planning her next move or retrieving something she'd forgotten. Detective Briggs explained that Melissa would be charged with multiple felonies: assault by administering a controlled substance without consent, theft by deception for using my money for the ATM withdrawals, and potentially kidnapping for forcibly moving me while unconscious, though that charge was harder to make stick. "She's claiming it wasn't malicious," the detective said, "that she was desperate and didn't know another way to help her mother without revealing the truth to you. Her lawyer is pushing for a plea deal." I didn't care about her excuses. She'd drugged me dozens of times. She'd erased my consent, my consciousness, my autonomy. She'd turned me into a tool, a thing to be used while I was chemically unconscious. The violation was absolute. Over the next few weeks, the case moved forward. My neurological tests came back normal. No seizures, no brain abnormalities. The mystery was solved, and the medical establishment lost interest. My primary care physician filed a report documenting the ambient exposure, but mainly he was relieved it wasn't something worse. Melissa's lawyer negotiated a plea deal, 3 years in prison for felony assault, with credit for time served and possibility of parole after 18 months. The prosecutor had wanted more, but my testimony would have been required for a full trial, and frankly, I didn't want to spend months reliving this. I just wanted it over. The judge accepted the plea in late February. I attended the hearing and watched Melissa, the woman I'd thought I might marry, be sentenced to prison. She cried and apologized, saying she'd never meant to hurt me, that she'd been desperate and ashamed and didn't know what else to do. Maybe part of that was true, but it didn't matter anymore. She'd made her choices, and now she was living with the consequences. I moved out of the apartment immediately after changing the locks. Couldn't stand being in that space anymore, wondering what else she'd lied about, what other manipulations I'd missed. My new place was smaller, more expensive, but it was mine alone. I threw away the Fitbit, couldn't look at it without feeling sick. Started seeing a therapist, Dr. Amanda Foster, who specialized in trauma from intimate partner violence. "What happened to you is a profound violation," she said during our first session. "You were drugged, controlled, and used by someone you trusted completely. It's normal to feel betrayed, angry, violated. Those feelings are valid." She helped me work through the paranoia that followed, the constant fear that someone was tampering with my food, that I was being watched or controlled. It took months before I could drink something I hadn't personally prepared or sleep without checking every lock twice. The GPS data haunted me. I'd requested my full location history from Google and found more than a dozen trips to Janet's apartment over a 5-month period, each one occurring during nights when my Fitbit showed thousands of steps. Melissa had been doing this for months before I'd noticed. How many other nights had she drugged me when I hadn't been wearing the tracker to catch it? The question made me feel sick. By May, I'd mostly rebuilt my sense of security. Work had been understanding, giving me time off and allowing me to go fully remote for a while. Friends rallied around me, horrified by the story but supportive. My family was less helpful. My mother kept asking when I'd start dating again, as if I could just move on from being drugged and controlled by someone I'd loved. But I was functioning, eating regularly, sleeping without medication. The therapist said I was making good progress. Then, in early June, I got a call from Detective Briggs. "I wanted to give you a heads up," she said. "Melissa is being released early. Her lawyer got the sentence reduced to 18 months with time served, and she's eligible for parole after 9 months due to good behavior and overcrowding. She's getting out next week." The news hit me harder than I expected. She'd served barely 8 months, for drugging me dozens of times, stealing my money, violating every aspect of trust and consent. 8 months. I asked if there was a restraining order. Detective Briggs said yes. Melissa was prohibited from contacting me or coming within 500 feet of my home or workplace. But enforcement was tricky, she warned. If I saw her, I should call police immediately. "She's required to wear an ankle monitor for 6 months and report to a parole officer weekly," the detective added. "If she violates any conditions of her parole, she goes back to prison immediately. But you should be aware and stay vigilant." That night, I had my first full-blown panic attack in months. Chest tight, heart racing, convinced that Melissa was going to show up at my door with more drugs, more lies, more violations. Dr. Foster talked me through it over the phone, reminding me that I had resources now, awareness, protection. I wasn't the same trusting person I'd been before. I knew what to look for. But the fear lingered. I started checking my locks obsessively again, installed a security system with cameras covering every entrance, and changed my daily routines to be less predictable. I hated living this way, hated that she'd taken my sense of safety and turned it into constant vigilance. A month after her release, I ran into Janet Holloway at a grocery store. She recognized me and approached hesitantly. "I wanted to apologize," she said. "I should have questioned why you were showing up at my door in the middle of the night looking drugged. I should have said something, called someone. I was just so focused on getting the money for treatment that I didn't ask the questions I should have asked. I'm sorry." I didn't know how to respond. Part of me was angry at her. She'd benefited from my exploitation. But another part recognized that she'd been sick, desperate, and manipulated by her own daughter. "How's your treatment going?" I asked, instead of accepting or rejecting her apology. She said she was in remission, attending NA meetings, trying to rebuild her life. Melissa had stopped sending money after her arrest, obviously, but Janet had found a support group and was managing. We talked for a few more minutes, and before we parted, she said something that stuck with me. "My daughter is very good at lying. She learned it from watching me lie to doctors for pills, lie to family for money. I taught her that people are tools to be manipulated for what you need. I'm trying to unlearn that now. I hope she does too, eventually. But I doubt prison taught her anything except how to be more careful next time." Those words haunted me. More careful next time. The idea that Melissa hadn't learned remorse or empathy, just better techniques for manipulation. I shared the conversation with Dr. Foster, who reminded me that I couldn't control Melissa's growth or lack thereof. I could only control my own healing and boundaries. Summer turned to fall. I started dating again, cautiously, with more red flags awareness than any person should need at 34. I told potential partners about what had happened, watching carefully for their reactions. Most people were horrified and supportive, which helped. A few seemed to think I was exaggerating or being paranoid, and I ended those connections immediately. I didn't need anyone in my life who couldn't understand the severity of what I'd experienced. Work promoted me to senior engineer, recognizing the quality of my contributions despite the chaos of the previous year. I moved into a larger apartment with better security, started running regularly, ironically tracking my actual conscious steps now without a fitness device. Life was rebuilding. Then, in October, I got a letter, hand-delivered to my apartment complex's office, forwarded to me by the management. The return address was a P.O. box I didn't recognize. Inside was a single page, handwritten in Melissa's distinctive script. It read, "I know I'm not supposed to contact you, and I'm violating parole by sending this, but I needed you to know the truth. I did love you. What I did was wrong, but it came from a place of desperation, not malice. My mother was dying, and I couldn't bear to admit I'd lied about her being dead. I couldn't face your judgment or disappoint you by revealing my addict mother. I thought I could help her without you ever knowing, and I didn't realize how much the Ambien was affecting you until it was too late. I never meant to hurt you. I hope someday you can forgive me. I'm trying to be better. I'm in therapy. I'm working on myself. I hope you're doing okay. I think about you every day. I'm sorry. I'll always be sorry. M." I stared at that letter for a long time, feeling a complicated mix of anger, sadness, and something like pity. She still didn't get it. Even now, she was framing it as a mistake born from love and desperation rather than a systematic violation. She'd robbed me of consciousness, autonomy, and reality itself, for months, and she still thought an apology and claims of love could somehow balance that. I called Detective Briggs. She confirmed that contacting me violated Melissa's parole conditions and filed a report immediately. 2 days later, I got a call from Melissa's parole officer confirming that she'd been taken back into custody. She'd have to serve the remainder of her original sentence, another 10 months, with no possibility of early release. The parole officer thanked me for reporting it and assured me the violation would be noted permanently in Melissa's record. I felt relieved, but also exhausted. Would this ever truly be over? Would there always be another letter, another attempt at contact, another reminder of what she'd done? Dr. Foster suggested I might want to consider moving to a different city for a truly fresh start. I thought about it seriously. Austin had been my home for 6 years, but it was also where everything had happened. Every street corner held the potential of running into someone who knew the story, or worse, running into Melissa again after she was eventually released for good. In November, I got a job offer from a tech company in Denver. Better pay, more responsibility, and 3 states away from Texas. I accepted. By early December, I was packing up my life and preparing to leave. Before I left Austin, I met with Detective Briggs one final time. She gave me copies of all the case files. I'd requested them for my own records, wanting to have documented proof of what happened in case I ever needed it. "You did good," she told me. "A lot of people in your situation would have tried to rationalize it, make excuses for their abuser, convince themselves it wasn't that bad. You faced the truth head on and protected yourself. That takes strength." I thanked her and left Texas feeling like I was finally closing a chapter. Denver welcomed me with snow and clean air and the blessed anonymity of a new city where no one knew my story unless I chose to tell them. I settled into my new job, found a good therapist to continue my work, and slowly started to feel like myself again. Months passed, then a year. The nightmares became less frequent. I could sleep without checking every lock multiple times. I dated someone seriously for a few months before it ended amicably, not because of trauma or trust issues, but because we wanted different things, normal relationship stuff. It felt like progress. In May, almost exactly 2 years after the detective had first handed me that warrant— No, wait, that wasn't right. There was no warrant. That was the opening of my story, but it hadn't actually happened that way. Let me correct that. In May, almost exactly 2 years after I first saw those 8,247 steps on my Fitbit, I got a message from Janet Holloway on Facebook. "I thought you should know," she wrote. "Melissa was released last month. She's living with me temporarily while she looks for work. She's different now, quieter, more careful about what she says. She asks about you sometimes, but I tell her that chapter is closed and she needs to move forward. I think prison changed her, but not in the way anyone hoped. She's harder now, more bitter. I wanted to warn you in case she reaches out again. Please stay safe." I thanked her for the heads up, but told her I'd moved out of state and had no intention of ever having contact with Melissa again. I blocked Melissa on every platform I could think of, changed my phone number one final time, and made sure my new address wasn't linked to any public records. The last thing I needed was another unwanted letter or attempt at contact. That was 6 months ago. I haven't heard from Melissa since, and I don't expect to. My life is good now, genuinely good in a way that doesn't require qualifiers or caveats. I have work I enjoy, friends I trust, a therapist who's helped me rebuild my sense of safety and autonomy. I've learned to recognize red flags early and to trust my instincts when something feels off. The experience taught me that trust isn't weakness and boundaries aren't cruelty. That the people who truly care about you will respect your autonomy, not exploit your unconsciousness. That sometimes the person sleeping next to you is the last person who deserves your vulnerability. I still think about those nights sometimes, all those hours of my life that were stolen from me, experiences I'll never remember, autonomy I can never recover. The violation was profound and permanent. But I survived it. I reported it. I protected myself and held someone accountable for what they did to me. And maybe that's the real ending, not revenge or perfect closure, but the simple act of surviving, healing, and rebuilding on my own terms. The Fitbit that recorded those 8,000 steps is in a landfill somewhere now, broken and useless. But I'm still here, still walking, still counting my own conscious steps forward. That has to be enough. When people ask why I'm so careful about security, so particular about what I eat and drink, so slow to trust, I sometimes tell them the whole story. Other times I just say, I'm cautious by nature. Both are true now. This experience rewired something fundamental in how I move through the world. But I refuse to let it define me entirely. I'm more than what was done to me. I'm more than the nights I can't remember. I'm the person who woke up, found the truth, and chose to save himself. That's the step count that matters most. Not the 8,000 steps recorded while I was drugged and controlled, but every single conscious step I've taken since then toward healing, safety, and a life that's genuinely my own. If you made it this far through my story, I hope you never experience anything like it. But if you do, if something feels wrong and you can't explain it, if your body is telling you that reality doesn't match up, trust yourself. Investigate. Protect yourself. No one has the right to erase your consciousness or control your body, no matter what reasons they give. No one. And if someone you trust violates that boundary, you owe them nothing. Not forgiveness, not understanding, not a second chance. You owe yourself safety, healing, and the absolute certainty that it was never your fault. It took me a long time to believe that, but I do now. What Melissa did was her choice, her crime, her responsibility. My only responsibility was to survive it and build something better on the other side. I think I'm doing that. Day by day, step by step, consciously and carefully. The Fitbit recorded 8,000 steps while I was asleep, but I'm wide awake now, and I'm never going back to sleep on my own safety again. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.